Welcome back to the Active Listener. Today we have an executive coach of the name of Louise Presley Turner. Welcome, Louise.
Hi, nice to be here, Mark.
Great to have you with us. So it'd be really interesting to know a little bit about how you got into coaching, your background. Let's unpack that. Let's talk about that.
Oh, where shall I start? Yes. Okay. So my background primarily was advertising and marketing. So having left school, my education, I worked my way up the ladder, working in advertising agencies, and then ended up working as a marketing manager for BMW. So that was the sort of my first career, if you like. And it was actually after the birth of my daughter, who's now 17, that I started really to question what I was doing, really because being a mom working full time, it was starting to raise questions for me about my direction. I wanted, of course, be a good mom and be home for her more, etc., etc. So as always, I think when you start asking these questions, you start finding answers. Things that maybe you wouldn't have seen before start to come into your conscious awareness. And this is how kind of coaching came in. And actually, it was a friend of mine who came bouncing into my office one Monday morning. She'd been on holiday and she said, "I've read this book while I was away, Lou, you need to read this." And it was called The Big Leap by Susie Greaves. Who was a big coach back in the day, in the noughties, in the mid noughties, and it really did. It did change my life, to be fair. So I had no idea about coaching at that point, or really wasn't really into the field of self-development. So it sort of ignited a fire, I suppose, within me. That's what happened at that point in my life. This would have been about 2005. And that's when I started to explore coaching. And if we go back to that point in time, coaching was really, really new. Certainly in the UK, there was literally a handful of coach trained providers. It was tiny, and ICF and EMCC was really, certainly EMCC was in its infancy at that time. So I chose an ICF accredited training course and off I went. And really that's where the journey started for me. I found a passion, and it really truly was a passion. I realised I could really get excited, I could help people, and it potentially would be a new career for me. So I did all of this while I was still holding down the day job. I realised it was going to have to be a transition. So that's kind of the backstory in terms of how I discovered coaching. And from there, well, I read many coaching books, and then books on neuroscience and quantum physics. It just opened up, so many, as I think it does for lots of people. So yeah.
So it kind of sounds like you fell into it. You didn't know anything about it, but was there any kind of connection with what you were doing that made it feel like it was a natural progression, or is it just completely something which was new to you in terms of skill set as well?
It was completely new, completely different, and obviously there always are transferable skills, and this might be something we talk about, but having a background in sales and marketing helped me grow my business as an external coach. That was helpful because I realised, to get clients, I was going to have to I'll put the work in, basically. So I think that definitely helped, but it was pretty new. I'd never worked in that field, the sort of self-help, self-development therapy. I'd never been in that field. So it was, yeah, it was very exciting and exhilarating, to be honest, at that time. Yeah. And still is. Yeah.
And do you think because it was early on that was an advantage, or was that a disadvantage because no one really knew what coaching was? What was that like looking back at it?
I think it was a disadvantage, to be fair, because I had to do a lot of the groundwork. When people would say, "Well, what is that?" I think people are much more savvy, much more aware, and much more willing to seek help, whether that be a coach or whatever it might be. I think things have moved on in the last 20 odd years, and I think it was really tough, actually. And I do think that put me at a slight disadvantage because I had a lot of groundwork to do. Yeah.
So how did you go from reading the book, deciding, okay, this is kind of my thing, this is exciting, to actually establishing a business, particularly in light of what you're saying, that no one really knew what coaching was? And I mean, looking at things now, we know there's different styles of coaching and various avenues. Where did you start? Where did you begin?
Well, first of all, I had the paycheck coming in from the day job, and that
Right.
was key. And it's something I've spoken about with many of my clients over the years. I don't think it's wise to kind of just jump in without getting the foundations in place. So I spent a good 18 months doing that before I went fully self-employed. So I think that's really important to say. And to be fair, I coached everybody and anybody that would be willing to be coached. I think that's the truth. That's where it started. And I suppose because it was new, people were curious, I suppose. So I just started off coaching. I put the message out there. I remember my very first client was a good friend of mine's mom. So obviously we don't want to coach any friends, family, but it was distant enough, I think, for me, to kind of have a good working relationship with her. And she was my first client. So it was through recommendation how I initially got started. And I coached everybody, that was willing. And there were some key things that I did in terms of putting myself out there and speaking at events and things like that. And eventually I started to sort of refine my offering. So I started to get clear about who I wanted to work with, what problem I wanted to help people solve. So rather than being a generalist, which I believe as an external coach can really hold you back if you're sort of jack of all trades, not so much as an internal coach, but certainly as an external coach, because you've got to market yourself. It helps to kind of have a clear sort of route, a clear market, a clear niche. So that's what happened for me. So, and that took a while. That was after I'd left the day job, I was still figuring that out. And there's been a few iterations of my niche and my target market over the last 15 or 16 years. Yeah.
Okay, so what would be good actually a little bit later, and it might even be in a second podcast, but to explore how someone goes around gathering clients and so on. But I'm interested to understand about how your career has progressed. So we've gone from this finding out about coaching to early stages, coaching a friend's mum, to now a very successful coach who's a published author, has done loads of different things. So how did you get to where you are today, and how does that compare in terms of the type of coaching you do today?
Yeah, and it's been a wild ride, I have to be honest. When I think back to those early days of trying to kind of, move from the day job, working for myself, gosh, it's been mad. Yeah, I think first of all, passion. I think that was the driving force. I cared about what I did. I had a vision, although my vision wasn't about being a published author and all the things that I have done. That they sort of kind of happened to kind of come into my life because I think of the passion and the momentum that was kind of there. But I did have a vision. I knew I wanted to work for myself. I knew that, I wanted to do certain things. I wanted to write. I think that was a big thing for me. So yeah, I think the early days, what I quickly realized was that I was going to have to market my services, and I was going to have to kind of, the clients weren't just going to knock on my door. That wasn't going to happen, and I quickly realized that. So I started to think about, well, how can I do this on a very limited budget? I didn't have a big marketing budget like I did when I worked for BMW. There was pennies in the bank. What was I going to do? So I had to be creative, had to be clever about it. And one of the very first things I did was started writing for magazines, local magazines actually in the early days, and then from there. It gathered momentum, regional newspapers, magazines, and then from there it went on to nationals, and then I was writing columns and stuff like that. And then the clients started to come, and the momentum's there then. So for me, clients started to come. I started to do speaking events, then more clients would come, and then from there I got a publishing deal with Hay House, my publisher. And it just started to gather momentum, and then I moved from one-to-one, which was primarily where I'd spent all of my time as a coach, into doing more group stuff, retreats, for example, and as technology advanced, online programs. And to be fair, I was running a very rudimentary sort of online program right back in the late 2009, 2010, even the technology wasn't even there then. So yeah, it's been a wild ride, and I've had to change and grow as technology's moved and advanced, and opportunities obviously have come in as well. So yeah.
So do you still do the one-to-one coaching, or is it now just groups, or is it something else that you do as your kind of specialism?
Yeah, and at the moment I'm working within an organisation on a coaching program as a program manager, which is where I need to be at the moment, and I'm very happy where I am. I think yes, I still do have one-to-one clients. The online programs are archived at the moment, primarily because it's just the time and the effort to do that, and my energy's very focused on my role within the organisation. But yeah, they're there. They can be pulled off the shelf at any point, and I still have a database. So social media following, but primarily my database is still there, which I believe is hugely, it's key as an external coach. Yeah.
So it sounds like your marketing skills have been really impactful as well in terms of progression.
Yeah, and I think I was. Yeah, they were, but going back to that point about passion, it was the passion that I didn't want to get up on stage. I'm actually quite an introverted person, so the thought of getting on stage, it's just something I got better at, and then realised actually I'm quite good at this, and started to enjoy that. But I realised without putting myself out there, and that self-promotion, it was like blowing your own trumpet. I wasn't going to get the clients, so I had to kind of get over myself. And I think a lot of coaches, this is where they come unstuck. They can be amazing coaches with all the qualifications and even the passion, but you've got to be willing to promote yourself. Yeah.
Put yourself out there.
Yeah.
So in terms of like people you would be coaching, is there a particular kind of clientele that you find yourself naturally being drawn towards, or is there a certain type of coaching that you undertake in terms of models? What does that look like for you?
I trained with David Rock back in 2006. So I've very much followed his system, his models, his process ever since then, really. Obviously, I've built other things in and learnt more about different sort of approaches, tools, techniques, etc. But I've always sort of stuck with that as my foundation. So that he's Dance of Insight and the Create model, etc., and Scarf. So yeah, that was the sort of core basis of my coaching practice. As I say, there's more things that have been added to the toolbox over the years. So yeah, so that's sort of the core of my coaching. Now, in terms of clientele, target market, that has changed. So I mentioned in the early days it was anybody. I'd coach any subject matter. What I quickly realised was that there were people or topics that I enjoyed coaching around more than others. So, for example, relationship coaching really wasn't something that lit me up. I didn't really enjoy it. And it was through a process of elimination, really, that I got to that place where I thought, okay, I really enjoy coaching around career change, career development, purpose, all of that kind of stuff really excited me. I was reading books, in my own time about that all the time. So for me, the passion was there for that subject. So I started to sort of tailor my marketing towards that market. I do speaking gigs about it. I'd write for magazines around that topic. And naturally then people come to you. It's more people are attracted to you than me attracted to whether it's more the other way around, by putting the right messages out there into the world. So that was my first sort of target market. My first niche was very much those that were in that career transition, had mainly of the corporate world, and they were reaching out to explore other possibilities, and I loved that. And that's when I wrote my books, certainly the first book, Finding a Future That Fits, and it's very much about discovering who you are, your blueprint, your values, your talents, all of that kind of stuff, and then using that to kind of discover your direction, whatever that looks like. And then things moved on. So as I grew as a coach, as you do, you start exploring other areas. I worked a lot in business coaching, business mentoring actually as well. That was a huge area. I think probably because I'd had the success that I've had as a coach. I've been very public facing as a coach, being an author, writing for magazines, and YouTube, with my YouTube channel and stuff. So people wanted to know how I'd done that, and that's how I didn't choose that. Again, people are attracted to you. They start asking, can you help me with this? And I created a whole online program around helping not just coaches, but therapists, you know, consultants, service-based predominantly, helping them to get the visibility that they needed to find out what their niche was, etc. So yeah, the niche has changed, I think. So the sort of skill base, you know, the David Rock sort of approach has always been there, but in terms of my target market and who I've helped over the years, yeah, it changed, and so should it, I think, just to keep the excitement and the passion there.
It sounds like a natural progression, but the two things that are coming across really loud and clear is that kind of passion to drive you, and that kind of work ethic to get things done. But you really have kind of a desire to do that, and then you've evolved as well in terms of your style and also about being authentic. I think is the thing that's coming through, that people are being attracted to you as a coach because you're being who you are and you're being real, and I guess people pick up on that.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point, Mark, and I think, well, I think people can smell BS, can't they? I just think you have to be authentic in business, and I think there is a lot of BS out there and people that are inauthentic. So I think, yeah, people can feel that anyway. I think that's, you know, part of having a chemistry session, discovery session is, and also you getting to know the coachee. Do I want to work with them as much as it is about them wanting to work with you, and that authenticity? So yeah, it's a key part, I think, in any business to be real, honest, authentic. It sort of sets you up for the long game. Yeah.
Well, that's great. Look, thank you, Louise, for giving us a bit of your backstory. I know we're going to be in touch again to find out a little bit about how you get clients as a coach, and also if you're someone who's looking for a coach and perhaps wants to go to a different life direction, that you're going to help on that as well. So thank you for joining us, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks, Mark.